Stacy, hi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having our little chat.
I am super excited to chat to you because you are an absolute hero in the world of fitness and such an amazing font of knowledge. So I have so many questions that I'd love to ask you. So I'm going to jump straight in with this. And I want to know the biggest misconceptions that you feel are in the female fitness industry. I realize it's a broad question, but what springs to mind?
I think the biggest thing is that we just assume that all the stuff that we've been told about training and nutrition is for us and works for us. And when we look from the high touch, we know that that's not true. So I think the biggest misconception really feeds into diet trends, fitness trends, weight training, zone two, all of these kinds of things that no one really questions. Like, is this really appropriate for me and my body? Or, they have their partner or their coach or someone who's doing it from a male perspective. And it's like, yeah, it's great.
I think that that's something that really stuck out to me when I read your book Roar. It sounds so obvious when you actually lay it out, but I don't feel like anyone else is talking about it. We're not just small men. Like women are completely different in their whole physiology and the training that we respond to in our bodies. And of course, monthly cycles, the amount of fat that we carry naturally. Like it's so obvious when you point it out. Yet no one else is talking about it. And everyone's like, oh my goodness, this makes sense to me. So can you just talk about that process of figuring that out and actually publicizing it with the information that women need to understand their bodies?
My mom will tell you I was always the kid that asked why. So it's kind of been intrinsic for me to ask why. And when my TED Talk kind of covers when I was at university, and I was always the participant in the metabolism labs, and it was me and two other guys that were the usual participants. And a lot of things, my results were not what the instructor thought they should be. So I was accused, well, not accused, but told I didn't standardize right, or I did something wrong, or, there's always these little things that it was my fault. And that really annoyed me because I came from a military family and I know how to follow rules. And so I was like, wait, no, this isn't right. I'm doing these things that I'm supposed to be doing, but yet the results are wrong. So how can I be wrong? It must be either the equipment. So we'd go back and forth about all of this. And then finally, I said, well, you know what? It could be just because you're a girl. And I was like, what? What does that have to do with this? And they're like, well, a lot of times we just include women's results when they match the men's. Otherwise, we throw them out because it's an anomaly. And I was like, wait a second. So then I started really looking at the context, and there was no representation of women in any of the textbooks, any of the images. There was no real representation of women. And then being a collegiate athlete and really trying to do my best and work with my teammates, and we're having fail points. And, as women, we talk about that time of the month and things that guys didn't talk about. So I was like, wait, there really is a sticky point here. Like, I don't understand why we're not being represented in any of the research, but yet we're being told what's good for our bodies. So that was kind of a seed that had been planted. And then going through, you go to any kind of shop and you see men's department, women's department, perfume for women, perfume for men. You have nutrition bars that are for women, nutrition bars for men. There's all these gendered things, but when it comes to the basic physiological aspect that really does say, yeah, XXXY, we know there's a difference. No one looked at it. No one talked about it. So it was like, there's a sticky point here and this isn't right. So that was kind of like the jumping point for really trying to go after it as an athlete and an academic.
Think that it's a two-pronged approach really, because not only were you interested from a scientific point of view and trying to understand it more from research point of view, there wasn't actually anything out there, any studies out there, but also from a personal athlete's point of view. So you realize this, which kind of helps us all to understand, okay, it's okay that we're not getting the same results as men, we are different. But then suddenly you realize there's no research on this. It's quite an overwhelming discovery that in fact half of the human race don't actually have any of this research that is applied to them. So how did you then combat that and channel this curiosity into the amazing career that you have built for yourself?
I think there wasn't a plan. It was just a do. So, I mean, like throughout all of the opportunities I've had the opportunity to work for an obesity surgeon. Most of the clients were women, but the outcomes were not as good for the women as they were for men. The prescription medicines for the patients were the same, even though, you know, you have women that's weight and body composition is different than the men's. So there were a whole bunch of little things early on where I was like, we really have to figure this out. And so going back to lab, answering questions that I wanted to answer for myself, for my teammates, for other people that were asking these questions. So it was just kind of a built upon because I had the opportunity working in a clinical environment, being an athlete, then translating into human performance research to be able to answer the questions that were coming, and also reaching outside of sports science because sports science is so male dominated. You have to look outside. And so I started looking at things like the fertility research and endocrine research and seeing that there were actually sex difference studies done. And so you could kind of understand what was going on, but just trying to bring it into the sports science world has been a battle and still is a little bit of a battle, but we're getting better.
But I think it's a bit of an enigma, isn't it? How do you actually form the perfect exercise routine? What is sustainable? What is actually good for you? Women might say, I want to lose weight, therefore I'm going to immediately do cardio. That is their go-to thing. Like, probably rather than looking at their diet, even, you know, they might look at their diet, but they might also say, right, I need to do cardio. I need to go out running is probably the most accessible one that they go to. But a lot of people don't actually like running. And often cardio isn't just the answer. And this is another amazing piece of work that you've done on the discovery of the weight training aspect on that. So can you give me a bit of information talking me through that and why it's important as well?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the cardio and women always defaulting to cardio, I'm like, that's a sociocultural metric, right? Because when you're looking at the research, it still is, yes, cardiovascular work will burn more calories, but that doesn't transfer into weight loss. We have to look at intensity, we have to look at building metabolic tissue. But the prevailing idea out there stemming from like the 80s and 90s of the Jane Fonda and the supermodel era of calories in, calories out, fat burning, it was all geared towards women. And we even see that now when we go to big gym chains where a woman will come in and say, yeah, I want to join the gym. I've been hesitant. And the person that's taking her through is like, well, here's all the cardio stuff. How much weight do you want to lose? But if a man were to come in and he's like, yeah, I've been really hesitant, the person taking him around will be like, okay, bro, you know, you want to build more muscle mass. Here's the lifting platform. So it's just very culturally endemic that women assume that we need to go for a run to lose weight. But when we look from a metabolic and a scientific perspective, it's strength training. We
Mm-hmm.
look at building lean mass because it's more metabolically active. If we have more skeletal muscle, then there's more what we call myokines or exerkines. So these are little signals that come out when we exercise to say, you know what, we don't need visceral fat, but we do need to store a little bit more fat in and around the skeletal muscle, not from a sarcopenic perspective, but for a fueling perspective. So when we're looking at what do we actually need to do to lose weight, and it's not about weight loss per se, it's about body composition change. So we know that short, sharp, high intensity work, regardless of how old you are, in strength training are really essential for moderating and changing body composition.
Because strength training